Here in Greer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Living Greer,
we're close and then
happy to be
we're actually like kind of emerge in the spring. Okay. So it was like very obvious.
I feel so far away.
I know it.
Yeah.
We didn't ban you or anything. You come up here and sit if you want to.
Oh, nice. Yeah, maybe.
I did about 2 years ago too.
a lot of people leaving the area. It's kind of a troubled town right now.
Good evening.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good to see you. Weather and people. It's been fabulous.
Turn this way when we walk in and we just,
Never
turn
know
right
which
over.
spot to sit in.
They're on the second.
Okay.
We got a full house tonight.
Okay, cool.
Both boys.
Nice.
How are you?
I had 6 kids, 13, 11, almost 9 next week, 7, 6, 4, and 2.
Do a lot of
Yeah, I gotta remember it because some of these birthdays passed or not.
Right.
Yeah, for Doma.
Off Rosemount Road, regional area. My husband's from Ohio.
It took this to hold up unless the meeting.
That area, no, I
Yeah.
had to. Others.
Oh, yeah.
You doing okay?
Yeah, good to see you.
I can tell.
How are you? Good to see you. Good. How are you? Good to see you.
They're not.
Hey, how are you? Good. How are you? Wait. Nice to meet you. Adam, Mike Norris.
How was your drive? Did you have to go back and forth today?
Yeah. And then, wait, Hampton. I can never time it right. So, it's just bad. Y'all doing good? Growing there? Yeah. It's the, good. How are you doing? Good to see you. Yeah.
Podium.
Crowd.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening. Looks like we got a lot of interest in what we're going to be talking about. I would now like to call this evening Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for the City of Greer to order. If there is anyone present on the board who would need to disqualify themselves from the cases being reviewed this evening, please state your name and the case for the record and complete a recusal form for staff. Okay. At this time, the case is being heard and voted on. The person that would need to step down, and that would be our normal procedure in which we use. Next is the minutes of the Zoning Appeals Board. You did receive these minutes electronically for the meeting on June the 5th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Ms. Chess-Melaglu,
Approved.
Mr. Toma,
Approved.
Mr. Crosby,
Approved.
Mr. Norris,
Approved.
Dr. Huey,
Approved.
Mr. Griffin.
Approved. Okay. During this time, we'll open and close a public hearing for each of our requests we have this evening. We will start with staff giving the basic information for the request and the applicant presenting their request. Afterward, anyone wishing to speak for or against the request will have an opportunity to do so. All speakers should come to the podium to make their comments, beginning with their name and address. If you have not already done so, please be sure to sign in with staff to speak. We ask that everyone that speaks during the public hearing keep their comments under 3 minutes. This will keep the meeting running smoothly and efficiently. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing for BZASE 23-05, Staff, please provide the basic information for the request.
Once again, this case is BZA-SE 2305. The address is 830 East Suber Road. The parcel ID is 05350301022728, and the request is a special exception to allow a daycare use in C2 Commercial District. Here is an aerial map of the property. Here's the current zoning map. The red is C2 Commercial, the light green is R15 Residential, and the tan up on the right corner is R12. The brown is RM2 Residential Multifamily, and the light blue is PRD Planned Residential. Here's a photo of the current conditions at the site, and here's the proposed site plan, and that completes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. At this time, will the applicant come to the podium and present their request? Please state your name and address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Trent Lawhorn. Our address is 1761 West Canning Drive in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. As you can see here, we are proposing a 10,000 square foot daycare on this parcel. Our plan has moved around a little bit as we've attempted to get the building and parking to fit. We believe it's a good site for the use, adjacent to other commercial and residential uses that this site is appropriately suited for such a use. We meet all of the special exception requirements within the code and would request your approval this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We will have an opportunity during the business session to ask questions of you and staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Now, we would like to give an opportunity for any person that has signed up to speak for or against this request to come to the podium. So if you would, come to the podium and state your name and address, and let me check you off my list here. Yes, sir. You can come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf.
Sorry, sir, would you mind going to the podium?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, they'll be able to
More
hear
my
you a little
height
bit.
too, you
That
know.
one works better.
This one works better. No, all right. My name is Mark Levine, L-A-V-I-N-E, at 20 River Birch Way. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board tonight and talk a little bit about what we've discussed at River Birch Way. I want to congratulate the parents who are who are looking for an approval from the board tonight to take care of their children. However, there are some concerns I have, and I'm hoping that we'll get some answers later this evening. My first concern is child safety. My background is public safety, and I understand I'm concerned about the egress into the property because we have so much traffic there is now. And much of the traffic we have in that area is not what I would call they're not productive drivers. In other words, they're always going over the speed limit, through the red lights, et cetera, especially between Suber Road and Hammett Bridge. So my major concern is for the children's safety. The other concern I have is this. Our properties are adjacent, or parallel actually, to the new properties that's being looked at to be zoned for the way they're looking for. The people in Bayless Court are directly in line with this property. They're directly in front of this property. So I believe that's going to be a noise issue for them. We need assurances that there are going to be fencing around this property should it be built to protect the children and have some kind of sound barrier for ourselves and the people at Bayless Court. The other concern is the traffic. And I know for certain thousands of cars go through that intersection daily. And there have been many accidents up at Suber and Hammett Bridge in the past few years. I can't give you numbers, but I've looked, I tried to find them, but I couldn't find them. But I drive that area every day, as well as my neighbors and friends do on Bayless and River Birch Villas. So I'm in opposition, or we're in opposition, me specifically, yes, because of the traffic issues and child safety issues that need to be addressed, and we hope we have those answers tonight, because it's been on our minds since we found out about this hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Levine.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Ann Parrish, and I also live in River Birch Villas. I live at 31 River Birch Way, but I also have a tenant-occupied house there at 71 River Birch Way. I, too, am very concerned about the traffic, and Mark summarized some of my other concerns. One of my neighbors who's lived there for 14 years at 47 River Birch Way, Jane Sinclair, couldn't make it, but she gave me a Word document. She asked if I could read it to you. Would that be okay?
Yes.
All right. I am Jane Sinclair. Not really, I'm Mary Ann. And I reside at 47 River Birch Way in Greer. I have lived here since 2014 and have seen substantial residential and commercial growth in my immediate area. I'm here to ask your consideration when voting to vote against the proposed daycare center to be located at 830 East Suber Road next to the new Starbucks. By the way, I like Starbucks. I have to interject every now and then, that's me. In addition to the folks being present tonight, and the potential buyer of 830 Suber Road, Jane thinks they need to be enlightened with the impact of traffic on East Suber Road, which is not in a positive way. Suber Road is a 2-lane road without the benefit of shoulders. It's one of the many country roads that make up Greer, and we do like this about Greer. East Suber Road cannot withstand any additional traffic, especially during the work commute and the school drop-offs and pickups from both Riverside High School and Riverside Middle School. The real estate listing for 830 East Suber Road states, and I quote, area traffic drivers, Riverside High School, 1,761 students. Riverside Middle School, 1,120 students. Woodland Elementary School, 1,078 students. Now, concerning traffic, on June 21st, 2022, Fox News did an investigative report on Suber Road in response to the Greer community. Stephen Thorne from the South Carolina Department of Transportation, known as SCDOT, was quoted in this excerpt from the report, quote, Suber's pretty rough. There's a lot of potholes on Suber, Thorne said. It's a road heavily traveled due to the school and park nearby. Thorne has watched Suber Road grow and change over the years. This went from barely traveled to, I don't know, I'd say 100 to 150 cars within an hour, said Thorne. The SCDOT's count shows 4,000 to 11,000 vehicles see this road on any given day. And that was the end of the Fox News story. Now add the additional traffic from the new 252 apartments at the Shoals, whose children will now be attending Riverside High or Riverside Middle. They will be coming from Gibbs Shoals to East Suber. And we can't leave out the 18-wheeler trucks going to Lowe's Food Market and back on a regular basis using East Suber with its blind curves on the Enoree River Bridge. And lastly, the number of school buses for both schools, and all on a 2-lane road. Now, concerning flooding of that road, on East Suber Road and Enoree River Bridge, it happens anytime we have a heavy rain. East Suber Road can be closed from 24 to 48 hours, depending on the rain, and then all the traffic gets diverted, making anyone trying to get to the daycare now having to make a left-hand turn into the property. So conclusion of traffic, I would think potential clients of this daycare would be discouraged having to fight their way in and out of the 830 East Suba Road entrance and would eventually find an alternative. Left-hand turns are next to impossible during the work or commute, gridlock at the beginning and end of each day, and school drop-offs and pickups during the rush hours. And there are other more accessible daycare centers available. Then is there another need really for another daycare in this area? There are
Ma'am, is that the email you're reading or the text that you're reading that go a lot further?
No, we're winding it up. There's 10 well-established daycare centers with 4.5-mile radius of Riverside High. And then the noise level. We currently hear high school announcements. And so we're gonna probably hear on Bayless and River Birch Way, the children having a good time. Now, as a grandmother, I'm speaking for myself, of 3 children, I sympathize with people trying to find a daycare because I had to work out of the home my entire career. And I had to get on wait lists. And then in the meantime, I had to find some individual, somebody I didn't even know, to take care of my infants so they could get in. So I sympathize with those people, but I don't think this property would be fit for a daycare. And thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Is there others speaking to this issue? Yes. Come on up, sir.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm Raymond Parrish. I live at 31 River Birch Way. My neighbors have exhibited a lot of concern about the traffic. I believe in transparency, so I will tell you about some things. I'm on the board of the HOA for River Birch Villas. We have spent some HOA money in trying to clear out the trees that are in that curve for the people who come around the curve at a high rate of speed. That's going to take place, but still the speed on that road is way too high, and getting in and out for me, driving modern cars and not an old 442, is going to be very difficult to do with additional traffic. And you've got traffic with the daycare center that's going to have children involved. We have not taken a position as a board with the HOA, so there's no person here that's speaking for it, and I am not speaking for it, okay? I'm a homeowner, I'm retired, and I like peace and quiet. I hear all kinds of things from the high school. I hear the planes take off and the trains go by, and I'm good with that. But 5 days a week, there's going to be kids yelling that I'm going to be able to hear, and I don't want that, okay? Mary Ann has already talked about the daycare. I too have grandchildren. They are in daycare. They're aged 5 and 2. And finding that is very difficult and it's very expensive. Again, there's a large number of daycares within the area. We just I don't think that this is the best place to put one because of its proximity to high density housing and the traffic and the noise, okay? I want to say one other topic that I personally have researched. And in the name of transparency, I will tell you that I'm a retired associate professor of family medicine at the Medical College of Georgia. And I'm currently a licensed South Carolina physician. When I walked that property and looked at it going through, there is a large number of power lines, high voltage power lines. Power lines produce electromagnetic fields. They're non-ionizing, but they are there. The state of California has done a study looking at residences that are close proximity to power lines. What they found in those studies, and there are studies that show the opposite, and I've reviewed them both, but there is an increased risk of childhood leukemia in children that are exposed to high voltage lines. This is a safety issue for children, and we're going to be asking children to spend 5 days a week in proximity to power lines. Power lines, I wouldn't live underneath them, and I don't think you would either. And no one here probably would. But we're going to allow children to go in and out of an area that's got too much traffic. It's going to create noise for the people that live around them and also increase their risk of a medical problem. And that's why I think this shouldn't be built on the location it's built on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paris.
Hello, my name is Jackie Courtney. I live at 38 Bayless Court. I am representing the HOA at Riverside Towns 2. I'm going to echo much of what I've heard here concerning the safety and the traffic. It is very close to a blind curve, and I'm not going to repeat everything that they said, but I did want to also add the point that since Starbucks was added, it just recently opened, we don't yet quite know the full traffic pattern that we're going to have as a result of that since school is out. Once school is back in, we'll be able to see the full amount of traffic that's going to be going in and out of that lot. There is only one entrance and one entrance and exit to that lot. And it already backs up to Bayless, the street traffic already backs up to Bayless Court. So getting in and out of that establishment is going to be difficult during beginning of school hours and work commute. And so I think until we know the full array or the full idea of what the traffic is going to look like, we just can't justify putting another business there. Thank you.
Ms. Courtney? Is there others to speak to this issue? Come on up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Evening. My name is Gloria Holland. I live at 16 Hillside Glen Drive in Riverside Town. I am an early childhood educator, so I'm not against that, but I'm also a substitute teacher for the Greenville County School System. And for me to be able to get to the school at 7:15, I have to leave my house at 6:30, and when I come to the gate, I count 1, 2, 3, and then I go. Chances of me, the part that I'm afraid of is that someone, when I go out, they speed around that curve, and so when I come out, I'm like, oh my God, please don't let nobody hit me. I have, like I said, I'm not against the the daycare and all of that, but it's just not safe to put it there because of all of the traffic, and it's not safe for us that lives in that community, and that's my scare, is that they speed around there. And so I have to leave my house about 6:30 in order to get to the school for 7:15. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, have you signed up? Did
Yes,
you
sir,
sign up
I'm on
to
there, I signed up to.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Gloria Holland.
Gloria, okay.
Thank you, sir.
ma'am. Is there others to speak to this issue?
If we didn't sign up,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a gentleman that's coming to the podium now.
okay.
I will recognize you.
I got here late because of all the traffic coming over here.
There is a sign-in sheet. There's a sign-in sheet right next to the podium. If you didn't have a chance to sign up, you can sign in there.
My name is Tom Abrams. I'm 11 Hillside Glen Drive in Riverside Towns. And Matter of fact, I used to be on the board, zoning board in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. So I know something about that. But I have no objection to daycare. But has a traffic study been done on this, for this?
We will be able to answer those questions. Staff will at the time in which we have the business meeting in just a few moments. So if you would hold your question, we
Okay.
will address that.
Secondly, if you go out at that time, it's going to be the traffic from the mind is going here. The coffee shop, and we haven't even seen the effects of that yet because it opened up after the school was out. That's what needs to be done. Also, it's craziness. There's even right now, there's tremendous backup on Suba Road. And one time, I'm retired, but one time I was picking up a friend of mine at 8 o'clock. It took me over 20 minutes to get out of Riverside Towns. You have to go and have a traffic study done. You need to think about what you're doing because it's craziness. As I said, I'm not opposed to a daycare, but not there. And that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
Ma'am, I'll recognize you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carolyn Magnus. I'm at 34 River Birch Way. 2 years ago, Dorothy Smith and I came to the police department and talked with South Carolina DOT engineers to find out how many accidents there have been around that area between our development at River Birch Way and Hammock Bridge. At that point, over a 10-year period, there were 15 cars that went off Suba Road and down the embankment. So I think maybe another suggestion would be to check with the police department, see what kind of accident activity there's been in that section, and maybe extend it down to the bad curve over the Enoree River, just because it is a farm road and it has no shoulders. And especially pick up and drop off, we've all gone through that. Those are the times that people are rushing and there's a heck of a lot of traffic because of all the businesses that have come there, not to mention the schools. But the police were very clear. They had an instant report for that section of road, and SCDOT put up giant triangle signs around the bend in both directions because of those 15 cars that went off the road in a 10-year period. So there is some caution there. That's all I have to say.
Ma'am, if you haven't done so, would you please sign that? Thank you. Are there others to speak to the issue? Yes, sir. Before this gentleman speaks, which I'll give you a second, I think probably as a group, you have told us about several different issues in which you have a concern about. So if your issue is that you have the same concern, well, please just hold it because I think we all now understand what the issues are with regard to the location. Thank you.
Well, my issue is also with the traffic. My name is David Little. I live at 6 River Birch Way. Back of my house lines right up with Suber, so I get to see a lot of this traffic go by. And the traffic is incredibly dense in the morning and in the evening. The problem I have is you can't control the impatience of drivers along this section of road. And constantly, the road will back up and there's a left-hand turn to turn on the Hammock Bridge Road, but the turn lane is up past where the Riverside Bagels is. But these people come around the corner on the opposite side of the road because they don't want to wait for their turn to get up to the intersection. that causes a real serious issue, because they're driving on the wrong side of the road. And the more traffic we have, the worse that's going to be, and I really think it's going to cause more accidents. And that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, sir.
We did receive 2 emails from residents. Would you like to include them in the record?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat that.
We received 2 emails from residents nearby. Would you like to receive them into the record?
Yes.
I'm missing this one.
Hear those emails?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Can you tell us what the emails say?
Basically, both of these emails that appears in just scanning it, it has established a concern, the same concerns that have been, I think, raised this evening, such as the traffic, the noise, the safety issues with it, police department reports, as well as, well, basically those things. And I think these 2 emails came from Riverside Towns and Inner Review Drive. Do you, as a group, do you agree with that? Is that essentially what you're reading into it?
Yes. Yeah, I read the same thing.
Are there others that would like to address this issue? Okay. Seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing for BZASE 23-05. Okay, we're changing gears now. This time I will open the public hearing for BZAS 2306. Staff, would you please provide the basic information for this request?
This case is BZASE 2306. The address is 1263 Kist Road. The parcel ID is a portion of 5-35-00-038.00. And the request is a special exception to allow a school use in a portion of R20 residential district. Here is an aerial map of the property. This site is currently zoned R20, and the light tan above it is R12, Chestnut Grove. The portion highlighted is the one for the special exception tonight. Here's a photo of the current conditions on the west side of Kist Road, and here's the preliminary site plan. That completes my presentation.
Will the applicant please come to the podium or present their request? You would just state your name and address, please.
Chip Buchanan, 701 Easley Bridge Road, Greenville, representing Seaman Whiteside and Associates. We're the civil engineer on the project. Do you want me to introduce the entire project right now, or I guess, this is just my time to talk, right?
Yeah. So during new business, they'll have a chance to ask questions and have
Okay.
you answer those, but certainly you can give an overview of the project. And then you will have a chance to respond later during new business as well.
Okay, very good. So this property has now gone through an annexation into the city of Greer. We've gone through the Planning Advisory Committee, so we've received some staff comments, which you can see reflected on the, what's that, it's behind me? Yep. We have met with SCDOT and Office of School Facilities at the site to allow this to be, to move forward with as a school use in the state size. So obviously now we're here for the local jurisdiction. The plan is for this school to be a charter high school, 9th grade through 12th grade. Has an enrollment of 700 students, which is what they're allowed as a maximum by the state with their charter. This school has a dual timing, I guess you say. So 350 of the students go in the morning and 350 of them go in the afternoon. There's about a 40-minute gap between the two sessions that come in. We have completed a traffic study, which the scope was approved by the city, Spartanburg County, and SCDOT. The draft of that was presented and approved by SCDOT last week. That includes what you see on the screen was kind of mandated by the city and understood. So that is the widening of Cox Road, which is the road on the southern portion of the screen, to 26 feet wide per city standards with sidewalks on our side of the road. And Kiss Road will be widened to city standards, as well as the left turn lanes constructed in the center and the right deceleration lane that's shown on the screen there. Based on the reports of the traffic study, which involved multiple intersections where would be affected by the school traffic. There will be a widening so Kiss, is there a pointer? Try this. All right, so this is Kist Road, north-south on the page. Directly on the bottom of the page, Kist Road intersects with Reedville Road. So one of the traffic improvements will be that Kist Road, as it approaches Reedville Road, is widened. There will be a traffic signal installed at that intersection. A left turn lane will be installed on Kist Road on both sides of the road. So to allow folks coming down Kist and turning left onto Reedville and leaving the school going Page south, I don't think that's actual south, but and making a left turn onto Reedville, as well as Reedville will be widened. There will be a left turn lane created in the center of that road as well, so to allow the through traffic on Reedville Road to not be affected by folks turning left on going towards the school, although it will be a signalized intersection, so that will be set up to allow for that to happen. It was mentioned by staff that this is for a portion of that property, so we actually had the plat recorded to subdivide this other tract off of the school piece of property, and that was recorded today. So we sent the recording information to staff this afternoon. And Steve Hubrick is here. He's the general contractor and the developer, as well as our attorney, Brian Martin. So if anyone has any questions for the three of us, we're happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, sir. We will have an opportunity to ask questions during the business session. Okay, at this time, we will be asking for public input, and I'd like to do it a little bit different this time by calling the names of the ones that have already signed up. When I go through this, if you want to speak, just come to the podium. Otherwise, we'll just note that you're here, and then when we get through, if we have others that want to speak to the issue but have not signed up, I will be glad to give you an opportunity to do so. Okay, the first one I see on these pages in which I have is Nick Yuva. I guess I pronounced that correctly.
My name is Nick Yuva. I live at 622 Cartmel Street in Chestnut Grove, right across from the school. Mr. Griffin, I have a petition here signed by 44 homeowners, or 44 homes and about 80 homeowners from that area. So I'm speaking on behalf of those who can't be here, which is a majority of them. So I would ask for if you would grant me an additional, I need about an additional 2 minutes to my 3, if that would be acceptable.
Let's see how it goes.
Yes,
okay?
sir. 72 people signed this petition here, all stating the same thing, that a school does not belong on these narrow, hilly back roads. I'm not sure if any of you have been down those roads, but Cox Road, Burns Road, all those roads, they are single lane to the point where you have to get off of the road, essentially, especially if you drive a truck like I do, to let anybody pass you. Those roads would have to be widened for miles, not just the turn lane, right? That's going to be a severe issue. If a fire truck needs to get by, you will have to completely get off of the entire road, and you'll be getting into everybody's yards at that point. And that goes for both Burns and Cox Road. Those are all the roads that families will be utilizing to circumvent going down Reedville, using Woodruff to cut through Cox and Burns to get to the school quicker. But like I said, those are single lane roads for rural use only. They would be about 2 miles of widening would need to be done for those to be up to speed there. I like to talk about the city's long-term growth plan. The 4 different strategies listed there in that growth plan cite this area as being, two of those plans cite us as being rural, 2 of those plans cite us as being suburban. Both suburban and rural allowing institutional use as secondary, but suburban allowing an 80-20 split between residential and non-residential. One of the questions I would pose would be, if with the Crossroads Plaza that's coming into 101 and Reedville Road right there's a grocery store coming, a Spinks coming, a gas station coming, First National Bank, other businesses coming in there, what percentage of that 20% of the allowable non-residential business is already in that location? Because that is the City of Greer's plan. By its own definition there. And if you look at the planning, half of those plans suggested that we be and remain rural, because, let me see here, the city's definition of suburban is having high-density neighborhoods. The rural definition is abundant open space with scenic countryside, widely separated large lots, and some clusters of developments like Chestnut Grove here. But aside from Chestnut Grove and the 23 homes in Braidmore Knoll, it's farmland. It's large lots. It's family land. It sounds a lot more rural than it does suburban. And if you start looking at the rural side of things, you're looking at 5% non-residential use. So that area is very much rural. It would require a lot more widening than just those intersections. And with that 80-20 split, even if we are suburban by the city's preferred plan, I'm interested to know what percentage of that 20% is already used up, if there's even room for more institutional use in that area. Another point I'd like to make is that with the traffic study, I'm not sure if you are all aware, but Kiss Road is out. The bridge is out. It has been for months now, ever since I think the end of February. There is a sign at the entrance of Kiss Road that says local traffic only, and there are orange detour signs diverting people away from Kiss Road. So how then can the board take serious a traffic analysis, just using that as a basis for a vote, if the road is closed to public use? Usually I have ambulances screaming all up and down that road because I live right on the road, right there in front of the entrance to the school. I see ambulances all day long, through traffic all day long. When you get off 85 at exit 58, that is how you get to Kiss Road, but you can no longer do that. You have to go up to exit 60, get all the way down 101 to Reedville Road to access Kiss now because that bridge is out. There is a lot more traffic that is usually going through there, but the traffic study, if it was conducted after February, could not have been taken into any account because the road was closed to public traffic. So that is a big concern for the 72 people who signed that piece of paper, is how can that traffic analysis be appropriate at this time. According to the new business presentation slides as well, like the one above me here, they have approved for adjacent property to have trees and things like that, a 25-foot landscape barrier and a 50-foot build barrier. They are considering Braidmore Knoll adjacent property, even though there is a road that separates the two. There is a road that separates Chestnut Grove from the school as well, so we would like that we be considered adjacent as well. All the people who live on KISS, myself included, will be staring right into a football field and staring into drop-off lanes. So we would like for, if this does pass, all that shrubbery and whatever else is required to keep the peace and the noise at bay be also applied to those KISS Road residents as well, since we are the ones staring right into the school, the face of the school. The last thing I want to bring up is my community's biggest issue here at Chestnut Grove. We're 170 homes, even though there's only about 12 of us moved in. There will be a lot of traffic, and for whatever reason, the school wants to adjoin their main entrance to the main entrance of our community. And looking at the slides, it says that the board is taking into consideration violating the integrity and character of a neighborhood. You can't say that you're not violating the integrity of our neighborhood while simultaneously conjoining the main entrance to the school to our main entrance. Not only are all the parents and students who can drive because it's a high school going to be cutting through our neighborhood and sitting in front of our houses to try and circumvent traffic, but we're not going to be able to get out of our community because that intersection right there will be full of families trying to get in and out of school. The road will be backed up all the way down Kist, even though I know we're putting in turn lanes. But with lights comes back up, right? Because now it's not free flowing when you get your chance. There's going to be people loitering there. There's going to be people coming into our neighborhood. We're a small community where the biggest home is $450,000. We don't have the HOA funds to put a gated community in there, and we will get ransacked by every single person who drives to that school. Now, especially because there's multiple drop-off points throughout the entire day. So our request, if the school is built, is that entrance needs to move. It cannot be joined to our community's main entrance. That will be breaching the integrity and character of our community. Also, one point I forgot to mention with the city's growth plan, it has the appropriate height for a building set to 1 to 2 stories. I would like to know how many stories tall the bleachers of the football stadium are, or the gymnasium and things of that nature. This is a rural farmland community in a little wetland creek bed. The homes are old, it's farm style. You throw up a huge 2, 3, 4 story football bleachers and lighting and everything, and that certainly does breach the character of our rural community. So that's all I had to say. We hope that you take myself and the other 72 folks who signed my petition who can't be here tonight serious in this matter, that this school, although we like growth, we're part of growth, Chestnut Grove especially, the school just doesn't make sense here. You would have to widen every single road for miles and miles. It is very unsafe. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Uva. Next one I have on the list is and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Brian Bank. Mr. Bank, let me, if you would, remind you just for the sake of time this evening, if you have some of the same things to repeat, please make it brief.
Okay, will do. Thank you. Yeah, Brian Banky, 430 Cox Road, part of the road that would be widened and part of the community whose character would probably be significantly altered by the plan that's there. And I guess one of the things I want to speak to is I grew up living near high school, and I remember hearing everything that would go on at the stadium, the bells, the announcements and stuff. And when I think about what it means to live in a rural community there, the reason we chose to live there and such, and my wife bought that 14 years ago, was to have that kind of quietness in the community that's there. But knowing that there'll be a football stadium with announcements that are going on, well into the night probably, and all those things, that will significantly alter the character of the community. So, along with the other things that have been mentioned, the traffic and all those other things, there are numerous things that there's just really no way to be able to say that putting something like that in a rural zoned community would not alter it. And so that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I have a Zach Machef.
Hi, my name is Zach Marchetti, and I live at 746 Burley Circle in the Chestnut Grove community. Thanks for hearing me. And I just want to tell you, I'm totally against this. I picked this property, this development, because of where it was, because there wasn't a lot of traffic at the time, and now the traffic is just gonna be out of control. And not only if this school is there, but we have to look at the growth in the area. BMW putting a battery plant in towards Woodruff. That's gonna add a ton of traffic to Reedville as well. Then you've got the stores and stuff going in. The traffic studies that they may have done can't possibly be accurate for what's gonna happen to this area. For instance, Chestnut Grove, there's maybe 40 families in there. It's gonna be 173 houses. Plus there's other houses going further down Kiss Road. You've got the road that's been cut off. It only goes like a half mile down from Reedville to Kiss. It's cut off because that bridge isn't there. So I don't understand how they could possibly know what the traffic's gonna be. That's gonna be the biggest thing. And the people that lived in this area or chose to buy properties here wanted, that rural-ish area where, you could still get to Woodruff Road within, 15 minutes. But that's my biggest concern. And it seems like it's fast-tracked and they're just trying to get this pushed in before the true traffic comes to that area because of everything that's being built on 101. So I guess that's my main concern. I mean, even the people with families and kids don't want this school in this area. I mean, I think that should say something. It's, it just seems like it's being pushed too fast, and at the very least, more stuff needs to be looked at. I'd love to see the traffic study that they claim to have.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Paul Fedorka? Yes, that'll be fine.
Yes, Paul and Lisa Fedorka. We live on 531 Cox Road.
Can we mention that this is our driveway?
The middle one's the driveway. So we're adjacent, and we were hoping to get some kind of a buffer, and apparently that's what they're showing on there on the second concept. But we wanted to know if the entire parcel was going to be cleared and then new planted, or are they going to try to leave some existing trees there to block sound? We understand that there's no architectural concept for the school yet to give us an idea, and that comes to mind, is it 1 story, 2 stories, or whatever? There was something in about the lighting apparently lighting for the school and the football. And I wanted to clarify, because it said that the lighting would be face down and it would face inside the property. I don't understand how they could do that on both sides of the football field. One side of the lights is going to have to be showing outside the property to the adjacent property. But our concerns is, the illumination of the lights and of course the noise and all. And
Will there be speed zones, monitored speed zones on that Kiss Road and Cox Road that the school would be in front of? A school zone, speed zone. And I think that's all we have.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Claudine guilty.
My name is Claudine Quilty. I live at 108 Bramer Knoll Drive in Greer. I'm not opposed to having a school, But however, it's not advantageous to our area. The infrastructure that we have what they're trying to build within, it's too small. And again, we did move there because we wanted a rural area. Another thing that is very concerning to me is obviously the traffic besides that, but the streets. The streets are too skinny. If, let's say you've got 4 times a day, you have people coming and going back and forth to school. Should a house, they call 911, okay, somebody's having a heart attack. The ambulance is gonna come, the fire department's gonna come, somebody's house is burning down. They have no way to be able to access going to any of those places. Somebody could die from that, and I know that sounds very, it's scary, and probably maybe never even will happen. But the consideration of that, or should that happen, that's too big of a price to pay for a school in an area that just cannot really handle it. They say they're gonna widen it. How far are they gonna widen it? You know, also the kids, we have kids that walk along the street. Even now, if we walk our dogs or even you're on the side of the street, you have to be very careful. People go down that street, lickety-split right now. And I mean, they moved it from 35 down to 30, but they still travel 50 miles an hour. When you ran it, when the traffic backs up, they won't be able to do that, but they need to have like speed bumps, something. We have kids walking down there, little kids, and they dart out, and I mean, even big adults that are walking there, there's no place to walk or anything there. That's, like they said, the 175 houses that are in Chestnut Grove, 700 students that will be coming and going 4 times a day just in high school. Then you want to put the grade school that's in there. That's going to be more traffic. You're going to have parents, not only that, they're going to circumvent. They're going to come through our neighborhood to try to get through and do anything that they can to try to scoot in there and not be able. They're going to make our street, which we're Bramer Knoll. We run, well, where Cox Road is here, Bramer Knoll, we kind of like comes from here. We go straight this way. So, yeah, anyways, they'll come down our street and they'll use our street to try to go around over to Cox Road or any other way. So anybody's going to be circumventing that. That's human nature, and they're going to do that. And like I said, it's just something that I don't think that the infrastructure is ready to set up for. And again, and I agree with the gentleman, they're trying to push something too quickly before they really take into consideration being a rural area. Also, the test for the road, again, how can they possibly have any kind of a test when the roads have been closed? It's only open to access to people who live there. So I'd like to see a report that's done. I also like to know exactly what the buffer's going to be, what is the name of the school that's going in, and what is their practices. Those are a lot of the concerns, just besides traffic. And that's a big major part. I'm retired, and I don't have to go in and out of my neighborhood like a lot of other people that are living there and they work, and that's will be a really big hardship for everybody. And the people who come and drop their kids off, instead of going down Kiss Road to go and pick up their child from school or whatever, because it's not going to be bused, they're going to go over on Cox Road and they're going to sit there on the side of the road and let their kid walk around so that they don't have to put up all the traffic doing that, so they can take off and go, and that'd be a mess. Thank you for your time and for listening to me.
Thank you. I'd like to remind you again, if your concern is the same that has already been expressed, I think we understand what it is. Annette Bradley.
Good evening. I am Annette Bradley. I live at 797 Kist Road. That's on the other side of the bridge from all my new neighbors, which I welcome them, and I don't mind having single-family homes in my neighborhood. I also own 370 Gin House Road, which is a kind of a corner lot attached property to mine. And I don't know if everybody's aware. The last time I
Would
came,
you speak into the mic, please? Get a little bit closer,
Oh, I'm
pull the mic
sorry.
over. Yes, thank you.
I don't know if everybody's aware of things that haven't been built, that haven't been approved already. The last time I was up here speaking with the council, I said too much, too fast. Channel 4 quoted me on that, on the evening news. The school, there's a school on Abner Creek. There's a middle school that isn't built quite yet. They're taking some of my property for the widening. I'm very close, one house is very close to the road. So we just finished, well, we're not finished, I'm sorry, with Kiss Road paving. They're still not finished. And as far as trying to walk on the road to get to my mailbox, I'm getting old. I do a twiddle, I'm in the ditch. I'm sorry, this is a passion for me. I was on vacation, and I drove all the way back just to meet with y'all tonight. And I have to go back to my vacation because I'm not done. So I'm very upset with this, and I'm totally against it. As far as signs that told us about this, I found out this about last night, thanks to Mr. Uver. There's no signs on the closed side of the bridge, but it does affect us. You know, so there was no way of us knowing that y'all was having meetings, unless we check it every day or something. I was on vacation. I'm totally against it.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Welcome my
Bradley.
new neighbor.
Hastings,
I think pretty much everybody's touched on everything that we were going to bring with our own community.
okay. I'm going to assume that is okay with others that are also with you. And I don't know about these other folks, so I will continue on down the list. Christine Salovta for Hillside. Okay. Jeanette Gabriel. Could be on 533 Laxton Road.
Yes, that's correct. Hi, my name is Jeanette Gabriel. I recently moved into South Carolina. I live at 533 Laxton Road in Greer. And I left New York to get away from this kind of traffic jam, schools, and all these, roads that you can't walk on. I specifically chose Chestnut Grove because of its rural and suburban lifestyle. So the last thing I want is a school put in either across the street or on another side of the property. That road is too small to accommodate any type of commercial or industrial type of business. It's just, you're gonna be taking away people's properties just to widen the road. And Reedville Road already has enough traffic on it. Route 101 has all kinds of land available. Why would you want to put a school in a suburban area like that? The 101 has plenty of lanes to accommodate traffic. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Are there others that wish to speak that I do not have your name? Yes, sir?
I'm on there. I signed up on the one.
Okay, come on up, please, sir.
Hi, I'm Bill Francis. I live at 621 Cartmel Street, across the street from Nick. I'll try to be brief because mostly everybody has spoken and said what I had in my head, but I wanted to just put forth a general concept. I'm a licensed civil engineer in several states. I just moved to Greer. I've worked in states all over the country, both on the public side, private side, 30 years in South Florida. I was part of the sprawl in Palm Beach County that went from the beach to 12 miles away from the beach where I lived. I designed it, I built it. I was also the town engineer for the town of Palm Beach, trying to keep people out of there and trying to not have development and so forth. And what they had in Florida, it was sprawl. For 25 years, it was sprawl. I'm talking just wall to wall. But they managed it properly. They addressed all the issues and they planned ahead and they widened the roads as they went. When you grow like Greer is growing, somebody mentioned BMW, hundreds of people are going to come work here. That's why I moved here. My kids are 30, okay? They don't need a school anymore. They're online going to school. One's a teacher, so I would be glad for there to be a school. Actually, I registered as neutral, but I'm not necessarily neutral. I'm for the school because with growth comes the necessities of life, schools, infrastructure. It comes along with it. If the growth is going to happen anyway, then accommodate it, but in the right way. And I look at just these general exceptions as far as meets all required conditions. I don't think that's been demonstrated. I absolutely do not, because I know what is required to facilitate this growth. And nothing that the developer has presented or their engineers has demonstrated that they've done their due diligence. In Florida, they call it concurrency. If a developer is building something out west, let's correlate it to that. If somebody's building something out west, that developer was required to widen whatever roads that got people to that and out of that. Whether it was a shopping center, a big development, it didn't matter. They were required before the exception was made that they committed and bonded the money to make those improvements. Until those improvements were made, they weren't allowed to build. That's all I'm asking for you to consider now is don't be hasty in this decision. Make the developer demonstrate that they haven't impacted the residents and that they're willing to put forth the effort and the money to do what's needed. The traffic study I am going to comment on because it is not sufficient at all for all the reasons that has been discussed. I don't know when it was done, but if it was done when the bridge was closed, absolutely inaccurate. And what's been presented to this point, 6 foot of widening, all that was widened was a little bit of shoulder. That doesn't address capacity, which is what the traffic study needs to address. With the increase in the number of trips on that road, 700 times 4, what have you, then add the trucks, the garbage trucks and so forth. It's not a matter of widening the road, it's a matter of increasing the capacity. And that's only done by through lanes, addition of through lanes, not turn lanes. Because the turn lanes, like Nick said, turn lanes would need to be 2 miles long to facilitate the queue of traffic coming in and going out. So that's all I have to say. Oh, I am not a licensed vendor for the city, but I'd be glad to give free engineering services and help staff.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Last name of Magnus, M-A-G-N-E-S-S.
I already spoke on the prior topic, so.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a lady.
We have a lady at the back, if you would come on up. You'd state your name and
Good
address.
evening. My name is Kathy Gosselin. I live at Braemar Knoll Drive. I'm not going to keep talking about what everybody else has already said because we've already talked as a neighborhood and everybody else has already put it in what we've all discussed. I'm coming from a different scope. I've lived next to a school for over 40 years. We moved away from a school because of it. I lived in upstate New York. I lived a block from a plot that had both the elementary school, the high school, and the middle school in it. You could not turn to leave out of where we lived from 7 until 8:30 in the morning or from 2:30 until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You had to do a roundabout way in order to get back into town. And this was in the suburbs of Glens Falls, New York. This wasn't in the town. My second home was in Glens Falls, New York. I lived a block from the high school and middle school. The traffic was contained because you were in the city. It kept it slow. They weren't going at a fast speed or a fast rate of traffic because you were in the city. There were police officers there and crossing guards there to make sure that the traffic was controlled. My third residence was in Moore, South Carolina, which we just left 2 years ago to move into a rural area. When we moved to Moore, and it's actually outside of Roebuck on East Blackstock, it was a rural area. There was nothing around us but trees and fields, and an elementary school beside us. The lane was a 3-lane road down East Blackstock. When they decided to sell the high school, where the Walmart is now, or Dorman Center, and move it to the outskirts of town, they knew that they were going to have to accommodate for traffic. So they changed that 3-lane road to a 5-lane road. In the meantime, once they built Dorman and had it established, that increased the traffic going down East Blackstock Road, where it was very difficult, again, to get out between 7 and 9 in the morning and 2:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And actually, it's a little bit past that. They changed that school from an elementary school later on to Dawkins Middle School because they saw that where they needed more area for more students there versus where they were. That created a lot more traffic as far as we had people parking in our subdivision, which was Salem Estates, in order for their children to come across the field in order to be picked up because they didn't want to stand in traffic. You had one police officer or sheriff's deputy that was out there every day daily to direct traffic in the morning and the afternoon. But if you were coming from any of the subdivisions further down, you couldn't get out unless the traffic had been stopped by the police officer. When trying to turn left out of any of our subdivisions on the same side as the school, it was impossible. You pretty much had to go a roundabout way in order to get out. I will also point out that in the afternoon, when people were lining up, and they didn't change the traffic pattern as far as people going into the parking lot to pick up their students or their children. So when you have 2 lanes going down through in order to pick up, you didn't want to be in the right-hand side because all the traffic was slowed, and it was at least 20 to 25 cars deep waiting to turn in because they hadn't accommodated for the traffic needing to pick up all the children because most of the kids, I mean, you still have people riding the bus, but most of them are going to be taken back and forth by their parents or by the brother and sister picking them up from Dorman. So it was a lot of traffic, and they've talked about traffic studies and all that. This was where they'd already planned ahead of time, and they still didn't plan appropriately because you still had a backup of traffic in both directions, made it very difficult. And I will tell you, the only reason we moved out of that area was because they started developing all the fields and woods across the street and put in several more subdivisions. That's not saying when this is done, there's a plot of land just down on the other side of Kist, past the bridge. There's 55 acres. If somebody purchases that and develops that, how much more is that going to increase traffic? I have no problem with a school. I have a problem with the traffic that comes with the school and the speeds that come with the school. The one thing I have noticed, and I'm going to stop, is there is a community in Greenville County that they have a recreation facility at the end of the road, and they have speed bumps. Well, that is a state road, and so I know that you can't put speed bumps in certain areas, but that might be considered because this is going to be just a straightaway for people to go down through, and considering speed bumps in order to help slow down the traffic so that we don't lose a life. And I mean, it is consistent. We are losing a lot of lives to people who are walking on the roads or walking along busy streets. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, to be fair to all, is there others that need to speak? The lady from the back.
Hi, my name is Rita Williamson. I'm at 102 Braemar Knoll. I'm actually on the corner of Kist and Braemar Knoll. So my concern is, one, I am totally against the school just because of what's coming. Agree with everybody else. I know I don't need to repeat that about the traffic. The traffic is already bad. Cars, they downed it from 35 to 30. There's still, all the utility trucks and all the building trucks, bringing the materials in, they're alone going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour just to hurry up and get back and forth. The bridge did slow that down a little bit, but not much. I don't want a traffic light. We already have a traffic light at 101. To me, that's enough. We don't need to put another traffic light for this at the end of our street. It is a rural area. There's a beautiful farm across the street. Many of us have moved there for this purpose, and it's just devastating to me to have to see this being torn down again. And I agree with whoever stated that there is land on 101. Go buy somewhere else where the roads are already done. They already widened Kist. There's not much more you can take. To put 4 lanes in, to have turning lanes into the elementary school and into the high school, I mean, there's no room. There's ditches. We have a ditch on the side of our house that they even took some of that. There's no more room. I don't understand who is even thinking that you can widen the street any more than what they did, just a little bit that they did. And it wasn't even much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Yes, I recognize the gentleman from the back.
My name's Larry Sinkular, 541 Cox Road. I'll make it quick. I would just ask not only this group, but the city of Greer, 2 things: transparency and communication. We've had none and none. Yes, we've had a couple of meetings, we were able to come. We know nothing about what's actually going on. My question I would like answered at some point is, what is the charter of the charter school? Is it a science is it a SETI? What is the charter? What is it going to be? Are there going to be sports? Yes, the drawings show a stadium, but some of those questions need to be answered. There are many kinds of charter schools, we all know that, but a little bit of transparency about the school, not only from this group, but the city of Greer, and just overdo the communication, because we haven't had any. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there others that could bring a new perspective to this? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Norman. I'm a resident of 734 Berkeley Circle of Chestnut Grove. My new perspective is I'm a new mother. It's a new role. I have a son. He's 1.5. This community has brought in a lot of young children as well, and you would probably think I'm the ideal candidate for someone who would love this type of development going in my backyard. However, we love the schools that are already in place. Abner Creek, we're thrilled. I know the teachers. This is one of the reasons we moved in. My mother is a retired teacher of 32 years. Again, I seem like I would be the ideal candidate, but in terms of already knowing what the elementary school system is, being in Spartanburg District 5, we have what we need. A beautiful new middle school is going in not even 2 miles down the road. How am I gonna get my babies and our other babies down to Abner Creek where we wanna go to school? The man just mentioned transparency. Is this going to cost tuition? How do kids get into this school? What are even the rules or stipulations of this type of school for a mother who's now going to have a potential elementary school and middle school in her backyard as well that's not on this development? Obviously the high school. I have a boy. I'm going to want him into a high school that has lots of sports program, i.e. Dorman, Burns. Again, the infrastructure is already there. Our kids want to go to those schools that are already there. This doesn't make sense, and we're very much against it. Thank you.
Are there others?
We do have an email from a resident of Chestnut Grove, if you would like to accept it.
I'm sorry.
We do have an email from a resident of
Okay,
Chestnut Grove, if
yes.
you would like to accept it.
And I'll just summarize, it's much of what we've heard with first responders, traffic, and they did have some confusion about the tract that we were voting on, and it is the area south of Kist Road. So that was the only unique concern.
Okay, we, I think, have exhausted the ones that would like to speak to this issue. So now we will move directly into new business. We opened the business meeting for BZAS 23.05. Staff will now provide their analysis and recommendation.
Once again, this is for case BZASE 2305. This is for 830 East Suber Road. And this is a special exception to allow a daycare use in C2 Commercial District. Here's the aerial of the property. Here's the zoning map. Here's the existing conditions. This is the preliminary site plan. To receive a special exception, daycare centers must meet the additional criteria shown here. It defines the lot area, the indoor area, the fencing requirement, and the off-street parking. Additionally, when considering a special exception, the board should consider the following: that the use meets all required conditions, which were listed on the previous slide. The use is not detrimental to the public health or general welfare. The use is appropriately located with respect to transportation facilities, water supply, fire and police protection, waste and disposal and similar services. A traffic impact analysis was conducted, and the developer is responsible for the required mitigation as determined by the study. A right turn lane into the site will be constructed, and there will be a sign with no left turn during peak hours for the exiting the site. Finally, the use will not violate neighborhood character nor adversely affect surrounding land use. The future land use map designates this as a suburban neighborhood. Civic and institutional uses are appropriate as secondary uses. Staff recommends approval, and just as a quick reminder to the board, if you are voting no on this item or the next item for any reason, we would request that you explain your response and tie it back to one of these special exception terms. That completes my presentation.
Okay. I'd like to ask the applicant to come back to the podium for questions from the board, as well as any statements in which the staff might want to make. Would you like to make any additional comments with regard to this?
Please. A few things I probably didn't give enough detail about when I spoke the first time. I do want to clarify that we have already, I've got two folks with me tonight, Craig Winall with Site Design and Michael Oswald with Kimley Horn, who performed the traffic impact analysis. With these two gentlemen, we've already been through the Planning Advisory Committee in the city of Greer. We've gotten very little negative feedback from the various departments within the city, including utilities, engineering, public safety, and so forth. We have completed our traffic impact analysis, and we've submitted it to the South Carolina Department of Transportation, and it has been approved by them. That is to add a right turn lane to the site, as was just indicated in the presentation by staff, and we will construct that as a part of our project. Furthermore, we are not rezoning the site. This is a permitted special exception in a master plan commercial development. That simply says that, you know, as C2, it's a special exception, and the list of permitted uses within C2 that don't require special exception is long, many of which will have just as much or more traffic probably than ours. I have that list available if anybody would like to see it or have me read some of that this evening. I think that conducts probably my remarks, and ready for questions.
Okay. Questions from any of the board?
I would like to see the list.
Sure.
Website and dues.
There was a lot of concern with regard to the traffic, and I understand that you did indicate that there had been a traffic study that had been done. The traffic study in no way addresses another item that was brought up as noise. Is there any way in which you can address that issue?
Sure. By nature, our school is not a high school with athletic events, with big public announcements, you know, an outside public address system. It is young children in daycare. The playground is limited to a certain quantity of students at any given time during the day with a very specific staff ratio. Those students are all young children. They're not school-age children, so therefore, I mean, to me, I have school-age children, and they're very loud. These are the younger variety who aren't quite as loud and often supervised. Furthermore, we have the buffer by the Greer Commissioner of Public Works power line area that separates our site from the adjacent residential development. And we also don't have nighttime activities like football games and outdoor sports and that sort of stuff. It's a business hour daycare. So we don't believe the noise, you know, from the 5,000 square foot playground will be prohibitive to the neighbors' peaceful use of their property.
What will be the ages of the children there?
Let me see if I've got the infant to 5 years old. I'm sorry, 8 years old. After school care for children up to 8.
Infant to 8 years old. Okay. Are you familiar with the comments that was made by, I think, Mr. Levine with regard to the police department reports of accidents in and around that area?
I'm not, no, sir. But we did a little study that indicates just a few statistics. The references to the high-speed corner, I can see why the folks who live in the neighborhood off of Bayless are concerned. They're 265 feet from the curve. We're another 485 feet from their entrance to our entrance. So that's a total of 750 feet from the curve. I will also note that curb cut into our site was permitted long ago. The Starbucks is already there. We are part of a master planned commercial development. that had both an overall traffic impact analysis done when it was developed, another one done by the Starbucks developer, and it was further updated by Mr. Oswald last month. And so I do understand their concern about the curve and the speed, but I think we're twice the distance from their drive from the curve as they are.
Okay, the traffic study that was done, if I understood you correctly, was done after the building of Starbucks?
Yes. It takes the Starbucks traffic counts into consideration. And it was done while school was in session. All the counts that we used were done while school was in session.
Okay, so you're
This study was completed prior to.
So the
Starbucks
counts were
opening.
taken prior, and then they did have to take into account background trips from the Starbucks.
Correct. We beat school being out of session. The Starbucks was not open, but we have statistics as to what a Starbucks generates that were used in conducting the traffic study. A couple other things about our traffic study. I might mess this up, so Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, but the agency that governs traffic studies allows some quantity of trips around a child care facility to be considered pass-by trips. That means that people just driving by decide to pull in there and drop their kid off for the day. I got kids. We plan to drop our kids off long before we are driving by. We don't believe that that's an accurate way to model it, so we didn't model it that way. We modeled them all as generated trips by the daycare itself. Okay? Then there's, what was the other one? The
narrative itself, probably by the companies.
the operations narrative that we have from our partners at the daycare also provides certain traffic drop-off constraints and just general description of when the drop-off times and averages are. And we were more aggressive or more conservative than that in our modeling of the traffic study. So I would say that the folks at DOT were pleased with the traffic study in terms of those two facts, that we were more conservative in terms of the amount of trips that we would generate. And traffic studies, in my experience, are generally black and white as to a certain amount of cars generates a certain warrant from the South Carolina DOT. We crossed a threshold and we're achieving what it requires, which is a right turn lane. And no left turn signage, which addresses a couple of the concerns that we heard about left turns off of East Suber into the site.
Was the traffic study, does it specifically address the right, like a right in, right only? Or is it something that you decided on your own that you wanted to do the no left turn during peak hours?
The left turn itself, that left turn signage, that came from DOT when we were coordinating with them. So that was something we did not consider the right in, right out, but then that was something they came back to us and told us that we needed to make sure that we include the left turn signage out. So that was a concern of theirs as well.
So it's allowed to make a left at certain times because it was deemed that the traffic was low enough
Correct,
during
yeah.
certain hours?
Yeah, so during your morning rush hour and your afternoon rush hour, so that typical 7 to 9 and 4 to 6, that sign will be posted. It's posted there, there's going to be time labels there to restrict left turns when the traffic's heaviest as well. So.
Right.
No left turns between 7 and 9 and 4 to 6.
And for the right turn lane that's being added, there's like no stacking for it. Was there a recommendation from the DOT in terms of a length of stacking, or could it potentially extend further down the property?
It couldn't extend any further because of the power lines.
It was modeled and required to be 150 feet with appropriate taper. And they are putting that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions for the applicant?
Is there any, as part of the buffering, because sound being a consideration that many of the folks mentioned, is there any sort of buffering? I can see that we're right up against the building line here. and then looks like a sidewalk or a walkway goes around the building, or is that a landscape buffer?
What you see right now is just a sidewalk around the
Sidewalk.
building. We haven't designed the landscape architecture yet, but there will
Okay.
be plants in the buffer.
There's potential for additional landscaping that's going to go into this as well, but there is a fence
Correct.
on the property.
Yes, sir.
And the fence is, can you describe it, or?
4-foot fence around the entire outdoor play space and then around the perimeter of the facility.
Sorry, what I'm referring to is the boulder line closer to the property line. Is that an additional fence? It looks like it'd be some sort of kind of landscape.
That's a retaining wall.
Ah, okay.
So just under C2 zoning, they are required as screening to either have a 6-foot opaque fence or evergreen hedge adjacent to any residential property line. So that will already be required as part of the zoning district. If the board can certainly ask for other conditions as part of the special exception. Staff did not feel with the large power easement, the distance from the residential, that between that distance and the required screening, staff didn't recommend additional. But that is certainly something the board could do if you'd like.
And the retaining wall that's there right now, obviously, is there because there's more than a 30-inch fall off. So
It's proposed.
But when it's going to be installed, then there's going to be a guard.
Yes.
On top of it as well.
Well, there will be a guard as required. I mean, the play space will be all encapsulated by the
Correct.
fence.
The
in
children
building.
are contained within their play space.
That's
This is an
correct.
additional, so you have building use sidewalks around all 4 sides.
That's right.
So people circulate around this building and they come up almost, right up to the retaining wall. So there's a requirement.
The fence runs it runs along 3 sides of the building. It's tough to see on that graphic. I can show you on a separate.
I got the screen here as well. What I'm talking about is this guy right here.
Yeah, correct.
Right, so I see you got your fence here. That contains children inside there. What I'm asking about is the retaining wall, a fall protection. Oh, you're right. That does not show up on this at all.
It goes from here
Yeah,
this way?
That's right. Yes, sir.
yeah.
You guys can pass that around.
It's highlighted on there now.
Yeah. The residential property that is, or when you're coming down Suber Road, and I'm trying to imagine this now, we get to Starbucks, and then this property is adjacent to Starbucks. And then there's a residential property, what's the name of that subdivision?
The Bayless Lane, the Bayless Circle area, is that?
Is that River Birch?
Bayless Court and then
Bayless Court.
below Bayless Court.
Okay. So what we marked off on this, excuse me here, would be property over here of the townhomes. Okay. Do we have additional questions for the applicant?
No, I think I would just add, like, most of the comments that were made are regarding to the traffic. So is there anything that you would point to specifically regarding traffic study that would point to some of the concerns?
think I would probably, this is a repetition of something I said earlier, but that, we took the current traffic counts while school was in session. And based on the. Could you say that again? Sure, no problem. We took the traffic counts of the area during the school in session season, and we applied those to the international traffic, what's the E? Institute of Transportation metrics for such a use. They dictated that a right turn lane be added with stacking. They also dictated that a no left turn signage rule, for lack of a better term, be applied to the site during peak hours. We are complying with both of those. Obviously, we can't address the curve that's 750 feet from our entrance, which seemed to be a large part of the problem. But that is closer to the neighborhood entry than to ours. I would also add that there is, the lack of curbs and or shoulders, there is a center turn lane. I mean, I know that center turn lane probably is fairly full of cars stacked to turn left during peak hours, but fortunately our traffic will be coming from the right and there's a no left turn dictate or mandate.
You mentioned that you use general statistics from other Starbucks. Can you explain that? Was that certain locations, some certain areas?
So the traffic study that was conducted for the Starbucks, we actually obtained that traffic study from DOT, and whatever project trips were estimated for that study, we're pulling into ours and just directly applying it to our background traffic. And from there, we're adding on our additional traffic from the daycare itself. Whatever traffic study that was approved previously by DOT for Starbucks is what traffic data that we're pulling from.
So typically, when you do a traffic study, you use ITE, which is Institute of Transportation Engineers, land use codes. And so for that one, it is drive-through coffee. And so they have compiled hundreds and thousands of different types of land use codes, and they assign the code, and then they have accepted trips that they apply to the model. So they did use drive-through coffee, not necessarily like a drive-through restaurant. It's very specific to coffee and Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or anything of that sort. There's, I think, over 900 land use codes, so they do get very specific, like a sit-down restaurant, a fast casual restaurant, a drive-through restaurant, again, a coffee shop with a drive-through. So that's when he was saying that they use specific trips. That is the trips that they used to assign. And again, they didn't, they used traffic counts, but then they also applied background traffic from the Starbucks. And you can feel free and correct me if I'm wrong, too.
And I apologize for not making that more clear. It was.
No, you're good.
I mean, we do account for future growth in the area as well. So we're not just looking at what is traffic today. We're looking at, okay, when is this daycare going to open? How much traffic? So we assume, I can't remember what the growth rate off the back of my head, hand on this, but we do assume additional growth in the area for other developments surrounding.
It's typically 3%.
That was not requested by DOT for us to consider those in this study.
I think you mentioned briefly a while ago that you weren't familiar with the issue of the power lines that was mentioned, or maybe you didn't. So let me start over. Mr. Parrish, in his remarks, had some concerns about there is several high-capacity power lines that go over the property. First, are you familiar? Is that correct? And secondly, is there any concern with regard to that?
It's not entirely correct that they go over the property. There's a Duke power line that goes between the Starbucks and, say, the Lowe's Foods parcel, the bagel shop. So it's not over the Starbucks parcel. And then to our plan south is the Greer CPW line, which is on wooden poles as opposed to the big high transmission poles that the Duke line that's on the other side of Starbucks is. So I'm familiar with both of those. Yes, sir. I would say that the Greer CPW line is no closer to our proposed use than it is to Mr. Parrish's neighborhood. The folks who we work with on these daycares have no issue with it. The South Carolina Department of Labor and Licensing, which oversees child care facilities, has no issue with it.
What's the number of cars that will be going in and out of Starbucks? We don't have an accurate figure on that. We've got a lot of high school kids that want to stop at Starbucks before going to school. So I say it's going to be at least 150.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the traffic study did take into account trips from the Starbucks. And that does include, any drive-through coffee. Those trips do include, again, the pass-by, and they do include just generated trips.
How do you know that?
Well, these are very accepted methods of transportation studies. Again, this comes from SCDOT reviews the traffic studies, and these land use codes are in a published manual from transportation engineers. So,
SCDOT screwed that whole area up by not
okay.
having a right-hand turn. But then what's needed is to go across the street so kids can get into school. So what you've done is totally inaccurate.
Can you point out where is there a way to point out nearby schools? Isn't there, I heard it was mentioned there was other ones in the area?
Sure. This is GIS up on the screen. This is the aerial of the property. This is Riverside. So again, this is in the Lowe's Food, the large white building that Heather has her screen over. That is the Lowe's Food grocery store. Again, with those commercial out parcels, there's a bagel shop. And then the piece that looks brown and just kind of graded right next to the red outline, that is where the new Starbucks is located.
Can you point out the Starbucks again?
Sure. Heather, would you mind highlighting that one so it turns red?
It's right
Yeah,
here.
so that is the new Starbucks site.
Okay.
Is this a super for the Starbucks and the school shared?
Yes.
And you're going to be closing a left-hand turn into the Starbucks at 7 to 9 in the morning.
The left exit.
It's out of. It's
out
exiting.
of the driveway,
Out of.
not turning into.
And there is a center turn lane in that location.
So they can turn left out of the Starbucks then?
No,
They
they
cannot.
share a driveway. It will be for all of that. If you want to pull back up the site plan. So I'll remind you guys the time for public hearing and from the audience comments needs to be kept to a minimum. The board can address the comments.
The board needs to know what the questions to ask.
Well, you had your time and they heard all of you, and so they can address those if they want. But I'm going to ask you to not have comments from the audience anymore, please. I'm the planning manager, Ashley Cotty, but these are Robert's Rules of Orders for public meetings. You have your chance to provide public hearing, and you guys did. And so I'll just ask you to please refrain from yelling from the audience, please.
Yes, and the board, the chair of the board, I'd also like to emphasize that point too. Let us ask the questions of him, and you're correct. We don't know all of the answers to this. We don't know some of the things perhaps that people that live there do. But I personally live about a mile away from this, and I come through that area quite frequently, on both Riverside High School and then turning left there at Riverside High School, going by Starbucks. And I do understand it is a very, traffic is very heavy there, particularly at certain times of the year. Right now it's great because the school's not in session. But when school comes back into session, there will be, a lot of traffic there. But that's not the only place in Greer in which this also happens. Is there any questions more about?
Is there a buffer between the proposed daycare and Starbucks? And can you show me on this particular diagram with it?
There is no buffer between the two.
Okay,
I mean, they
so-
were once one parcel. The Starbucks developer subdivided it, and we're buying the rest.
Okay, so the traffic essentially, just help me understand, from Starbucks in the drive-through will wrap around the daycare. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Let me
Could you-
show you this. I don't have the whole picture, but I think I got enough.
Okay. So that's y'all.
Do you want to show it on the screen though, Heather, so we can just with the, or,
This is the shared entry in Starbucks is over here. Starbucks traffic will come in. Go out.
And there's no buffer between here.
the top,
This is the property line right here.
the red? Okay, so this is the shared entrance, and you come in and this is the daycare, and then you go left to the Starbucks, and then you wrap around the drive-through for Starbucks over here. And again, they have a shared entrance, only one egress onto Super Road. And again, that is something that was studied by DOT. You can only have full access a certain distance from the intersection. So from that main kind of super intersection, it does meet the distance requirements for a full access. But they do have a shared access right here. And again, that is that northbound right turn lane that's required by the traffic study into the site, right here.
But there won't be, the fencing won't be between the Starbucks and the daycare.
There's none proposed. Typically, we do not require any buffer between C2 and commercial uses, only between residential and non-residential.
I have a question.
They will have fencing around the play area for the children. Yes.
What are the other types of uses that are required for special exception? And is a daycare, is the noise the reason a special exception is required?
So there are, so for any zoning district, there are uses that are allowed by right. There are uses that are allowed by special exception, and then there are uses that are just a hard no. So childcare is one of them. Let me pull up the other uses that are special exception. And again, they are the Article 712 with the additional criteria that have to be met. It just requires an additional layer of review by the board. It doesn't really say why daycare has to have extra, but again, I think the indoor play space, the outdoor play space, adequate area, those are all things that are addressed in our special exception criteria, so I assume that's why it's on the list. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah.
Other than signage, is there any deterrent for the turning of left into Starbucks during certain hours? I mean, just the signs up, no left turn during these
Just the
periods?
signs, correct. No pork chop or anything like that.
If you provided that, then it would preclude people from making a left
All
in.
the
So
time.
it is
Right.
not a designated right in, right out only. It is,
Mhm.
and so the only thing that can seemingly be done would be to provide that signage and attempt to enforce it in some way.
Correct.
What is the required buffering between a residential property and the C2? Normally it would be, it was staff's opinion that there's no required additional buffering as a result of the buffering that's happening naturally because of the power.
Sure. Just in general, in C2 for any residential area, it's only a screening requirement, and it can be a 6-foot fence or evergreen hedge.
And the opaque fence
Mhm.
of some sort? Okay.
Just from having a child, from a safety perspective, that play area, you mentioned is a 4-foot fence, and you're right next to I want to say, parking lot for Starbucks. Is that right? How big of a gap is that? I'm just thinking about, I mean, I know you're saying it's not a requirement, but
The minimum is a 4-foot fence.
So here, this is the play area, so it would be, that looks to be about 20, but I'm not.
and where's the parking lot, I guess?
So here's parking, and here's parking, but this is the drive-through, and this is the dumpster
There's going to be no
that you back
buffer
in.
there, and just is it like a chain link fence?
Yes.
I'm just curious why y'all didn't think to put any kind of buffer right there, in your thoughts?
Good question.
The site precludes us pulling the building any further down because of the grade change. You see the retaining wall that we were discussing earlier was already to help address some of that. We don't have space with the power line.
Between the fence and the parking lot on the other side? Well,
Don't have any further room to shift the building down the page, which would increase the buffer. If you're defining the buffer just as open space between the two uses, we couldn't increase that space any further to fit our 10,000 square foot building. Am I answering your question?
I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like screening or hedges, or why you went with a 4-foot fence, nothing higher?
4-foot fence is generally acceptable practice in the industry. It's what's required by our national partners' standards of all their construction projects. It's also the same size that's required by South Carolina DLLR and its standards for a child care facility.
Staff, from your experience in the past addressing that same issue, what is an alternative to that that would provide better protection for the children between the parking lot and the?
I mean, you could potentially require an opaque fence, like a wood or vinyl, to where there weren't additional spacing. Or you could require additional planting or height. I mean, any option if you felt strongly that that was necessary.
There's also planting on the Starbucks side, up against the parking lot.
Yeah, the Starbucks does have foundation plantings. I mean, it's shrubbery, so it's not heavy, evergreen, but they do have plantings along this stretch.
Is it there now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I understand it meets code, but practical sense, just for me, that's just a concern I had from things that go on in the world today, it seems like. I understand you're trying to meet code, but just thinking about the integrity of the community and what goes on in a high-traffic area, I just don't think that's been fully thought out. I mean, I know you're saying you're meeting code, but just thinking from practical applications out, especially next to a high-traffic facility with all types of strangers that could come in and out of it. That's my concern.
And we could pull that back. We could pull that play area down some. Craig is right. We could reorient the 5,000 square foot playground probably in a more linear from front to back orientation to not have it quite as close to the property line. We'd be happy to study that. And there's a very managed and supervised rate of supervisors to children on the playground. So there's no point in time where the children are out there without adult supervision.
Okay, board, do you have additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Okay, do I have a motion with regard to BZASSE 23-05 from the board?
Motion to approve?
Just, I'd like to make a motion approved to do what we talked about with the additional screening on that back end with what you proposed, so.
So you are,
Opaque fence.
Yeah. Adding on to your motion.
Okay.
What exactly, but if we're going to define it, let's.
Motion to approve with the setback that you described with the,
So enhanced
the play area.
buffering between the Starbucks parking lot and the play area?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Chesmelaglu, are you okay with that proposed
Yes.
amendment? Okay, so that would be a motion to approve as amended. So are you saying you would second that
Second,
as amended?
as amended.
Okay.
May I add one more thing to that?
You can.
To address the noise concerns that were brought up, I'd like to see that a 6-foot opaque fence be added along that runs parallel with the retaining wall along for the residential area there. So if they were to add a 6-foot wall there, I think it will provide additional fall protection, but also then provide some sort of noise mitigation. Since there is no practical way to provide any additional plantings, and as you stated, that your recommendation was that there was adequate buffering to begin with.
Would you, do you want it as a requirement adjacent to the retaining wall, or would you be okay as long as it were between the residential and, like if it were on the property line across from these, like between the housing?
The retaining wall is there because there's a fall of grade towards
Got it,
the homes,
okay.
correct?
Correct.
So an additional,
Okay.
a 6-foot fence
I'm
on
not an
the,
engineer, so I'm going to trust you guys. I just want to make sure
It would
if,
need
if
to
they
be-
can't meet that, if there's another way, I just want to make sure we're all clear. Because they are required to do a 6-foot fence or foliage, and so my guess is it would be there anyway, but it's fine to add that as a
the
condition.
sidewalk. But my issue would be is that the sidewalk that's showing around there would prevent any continuous buffering from practically happening through, say, if you're going to put a bunch of evergreens or something like that along there, right? So in lieu of that, because there is seemingly no other options, as you said, the building can't rotate as you look at this thing, that even if you try to rotate or anything to it, it's hard up against the Starbucks property line. There's no way to rotate this thing, and if you're going to keep your building geometry, there's nowhere else for it to go. So these play areas could be shrunk down, right, and elongated towards the back or the rear of the site. And if you provided a 6-foot opaque fence of your, material of your choosing, parallel with your retaining wall to provide a visual and sound buffer from the neighbors there.
We'll be required to plant or build a fence. Are you not okay with an evergreen buffer?
If
I
it would,
prefer evergreen just because I don't want to deal with a fence. I think they generally look bad after a few years.
I generally agree with you, but I also do believe as I look at the layout that's there, I don't know that it is mostly continuous. And not seeing your landscape plan, a final landscape plan, I understand that this is your preliminary, so it doesn't show everything.
Can I approach you?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, are you suggesting?
I'm saying, basically, if we're going to just do this, all the way down the line like this, it's right here is the pinch point where I'm saying that it just doesn't quite get there. And so if these individuals that are, down here are trying to get some sort of screening or buffering, whether it be sound or visual, then that was my concern there.
We'll figure out a way to make
It's a requirement already, though. It's going to be an either or, and it needs to be continuous. So, but it's actually a standing requirement
It
already.
is. It is in C2 zoning, yes.
Okay. 'Cause I apologize then because I
No,
thought
that's
that
okay.
your staff
That's
recommendation
okay.
was
It's-
that there was no additional buffering requirement.
Correct,
You do
additional, but there is a requirement for a continuous screen, whether that be a 6-foot opaque fence or evergreen hedges. So they have to do one or the other, the entire property line.
Either or is fine with me. I apologize. I thought that you were saying
That's
that you
okay.
had waived that requirement because the buffering was sufficient as it existed.
No, I'm glad you asked. So are you okay with that amended motion as well?
Let's just rewind 5 minutes and go right back to
That's
what we were
okay.
doing before.
Okay. So not necessary because it's already required?
It's already in there, so.
Okay. So, yeah, proceed, sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the motion for approval.
Y'all okay if I call vote?
The
Okay.
board is ready for a vote.
All right, Ms. Chesmelaglu?
Approved.
Mr. Toma?
Approved.
Mr. Crosby?
Approved.
Mr. Norris?
Approved.
Dr. Huey?
Denied.
Mr. Griffin?
Approved.
Dr. Huey, can you please expand on that?
Yeah, I don't believe it it meets the Part B of your.
B? Okay.
Yeah, the detriment to the public health and general welfare, just having a daycare next to a Starbucks, I just don't think that's safe for children and I have children in daycare that are next to, their daycare's next to a high-traffic facility, commercial facility, so I know what that looks like. And it's also off for Super Road, so just, I have to
Okay.
share some of those same
Criteria.
safety concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to remind the applicant that you need to be in contact with the planning staff for next steps with regard to this.
Okay. That is an approval, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Okay, at this time, we will open the business meeting for BZASE 23-08. Staff will now provide the analysis and recommendation.
Okay, this case is BZASE 2306. The applicant is Kist Road Charter School. The address is 1263 Kist Road, and the request is a special exception to allow a school use in a portion of R20 residential district. Here's the aerial. Here's the zoning map. Here's a photo of the existing conditions. And here's the preliminary site plan. Once again, when considering a special exception, the board should consider the following. The use meets all required conditions, is not detrimental to public health or welfare. The use is appropriately located with respect to transportation facilities and water supply, fire and police, waste and disposal. A traffic impact analysis is currently being conducted with the Office of School Facilities, which is part of SCDOT. SCDOT also, their general traffic engineers are reviewing this. The city and Spartanburg County input. The developer is responsible for required mitigation. Turn lanes at the school entrances are expected, and also potential future signalization at the school entrances. Turn lanes and signalization at Kist Road and Reedville Road will also most likely be required. The use will not violate neighborhood character nor adversely affect surrounding land use. The future land use map designates this as suburban neighborhood. Civic and institutional uses are appropriate as secondary uses. Primary uses are residential and parks. Staff has also proposed condition to address this criteria. In order to address the special exception criteria and public comments received during annexation procedures, staff proposes the following conditions. The special exception applies to only the portion of property south of Kist Road, the portion shown previously, First, the building line for any structure, game court, field, pool, recreation area, et cetera, a minimum of 50 feet from any adjacent residential property line. Properties in Braemore Knoll subdivision to be considered as adjacent. For the landscape buffer, a minimum of 25 feet from any adjacent residential property line. Properties in Braemore Knoll subdivision to be considered as adjacent. Buffers shall be heavily landscaped and include evergreen foliage, shrubbery at least 6 feet in height at planting, continuous opaque screen at least 6 feet in height, and at least one tree every 50 feet. They can be clustered. In no case may trees be more than 100 feet apart. For the lighting, any pole lighting must have downlit features and/or facing internal to the site, not to exceed 1 foot candle at property lines. A photometric plan will be required with the site development plan. The developer has provided updated conceptual site plan that meets these conditions. Therefore, staff recommends approval with the conditions outlined above. That completes my presentation.
Okay, at this time, if I could ask the applicant to come back to the podium for additional questions from staff as well as, from the board.
I think one of the first things that we should probably get past is the traffic study, and as to if you could maybe talk about the bridge closing versus how you conducted your study.
Okay, so, and I meant to mention this first time, so similar to the previous case, we were asked by SCDOT to add in background traffic counts that do not currently exist. So that was 4 developments that we were asked to add in basically as existing traffic when we evaluate stuff. The first was the subdivision on Kist Road, which is not Chestnut Grove, but an additional subdivision that's currently been, I think, going through planning approval right now. I don't know the name of that subdivision.
I don't think it has a name yet. It's on Kist and Gin House Road.
Okay.
It's a mixed product development with some single family and some townhomes.
Okay. There's also and that study was conducted by ICE. There's a multifamily development that's also in this area, and that study was conducted by JMT. The traffic study for Chestnut Grove at full build-out was conducted by Ramey Kemp and Associates. And the District 5 Middle School, which was referenced earlier, was conducted by Impact Design. So all of those were added to the background of the traffic, which we will, our traffic will be was added in with that for the study. And that's how all of those mitigation warrants were decided upon by the traffic engineer. And that study has been presented to DOT, and they did concur with those, the mitigation that I described earlier in the presentation. I think another question came up about the height of the school. So it is a 1-story school. It does have a gymnasium, so there is a portion of the school that is about 30 feet tall, but the majority of the school is less than 20 feet tall, where the classroom wings are.
Are there additional structures or accessory structures such as the, seating or grandstands that was raised in terms of?
There will be seating for the football stadium. I don't know that it would be a grandstand with, hundreds of feet tall or anything like that. And then staff also addressed the lighting concern. So those are referred to as cutoff fixtures. And there will be a photometric plan that's submitted as part of our site development permitting package, which shows no light pollution off of our property within the allowable tolerances that are in the city's code.
Back to the traffic study, there was a lot of discussion about the fact that the traffic study was done during a period in which one of the roads was closed.
Oh, the bridge.
The bridge was closed?
I was curious about that. Is the bridge open now? Is it? Okay.
So,
when does it open?
So would that have an impact on the traffic study?
I cannot say. I mean, I'm sure that it would, but we were not asked to by DOT, we were not asked to figure out a way to factor that in. And that bridge is a Spartanburg County bridge. The study date and the study intersections were approved by Spartanburg County as well as SCDOT and the city of Greer.
Yeah, I think I know.
The Kiss Road itself, there was discussion about its being very narrow. And I hadn't read all of the.
I described a little bit of the widening. I can go through it again. So Kist Road will be widened to have two, or, where there's not turn lanes, it will be a minimum of 22 feet wide with a 2-foot shoulder on each side, so a total of 26 feet of asphalt. And we will be installing sidewalks along Kist Road and Cox Road for the entire frontage of our property.
It's still 2-lane?
It will be it'll be a 2-lane road, and we will be installing, you kind of see it on there, but we will be installing left turn lanes in and out of the development in order to allow through traffic to not be affected by folks waiting to turn left.
Okay, how far past Kiss Road and also before you get to the school itself will that extend?
So
basically, how long will the widening be?
So the widening will go across our frontage and stop at Cox Road, and then I described earlier as Kist extends to Reedville Road, there will be widening at the Reedville and Kist Road intersection, creating left turn lanes in all 4 directions as well as a traffic light.
Okay.
Is there a way you can zoom out and kind of give me an aerial of
Sure, we
the
can
major
pull up.
roads and where this bridge is? And
Yeah, we can pull up GIS for you. It should be up from the previous one. We'll just go to it. So city standards for any development, school, residential, commercial, industrial, we require any roads adjacent to the project to be widened and to meet city standards. So they are required to widen both Kist Road and Cox Road along their property frontage to meet minimum city standards. So it would not extend past that.
You put a traffic light in there, and then you're blocking the entrance at Raymar and Kiss. We will not be able to get in and out of our subdivision from there and Cox. You're completely blocking us in. The traffic light goes in.
Did the board have a question that I can answer?
Cars coming back and forth, not counting our neighborhood, their neighborhood, and then what's coming from Abner Creek Road and all the back roads. We will never be able to get in and out of our neighborhood.
Yeah, there's no 3 lanes, just turn lanes.
Yeah, there's no room now.
BMW batteries, they're gonna be driving right past my house all day too.
Well,
BMW's gonna get their end down there.
if you would, let's let the board address the questions to the applicant.
The annexation just took place last week, according to the presentation.
So this was, I believe, June 13th was the second reading?
That's correct, yeah. The
Yes.
second reading for this case was June
Okay.
13th.
So where does our jurisdiction end with regards to this? Because this
Sure.
is now, this parcel is Greer.
Yes.
Presumably adjacent parcels.
So-
And the extension back to Reedville Road might not be. Is
Correct.
Totally outside of anything that we've got.
That
any
is
sort of
true.
control.
That is Spartanburg County. So on the map, so this is the parcel in question. Again, it was annexed as one big parcel on both sides of Kist Road. They have subdivided the property. So this special exception is only for this piece south of Kist Road. The traffic study did take into account the potential for an additional school on this other piece of the original property. So they did include those background trips. But again, if and when that school were to develop, that would have to come back through the board for an additional public hearing, special exception. It requires a site plan. So again, we're just looking at this piece, although they did count it in the study. So this is City of Greer. Chestnut Grove is right here, and this is City of Greer. This is Abner Creek kind of school up here, and this is the new subdivision that he mentioned that had to be included in the study, Kist and Gin House. And then all of the colors that you see, those are City of Greer. And then anything in between that's just green, that doesn't have this kind of light tan overlay, that is Spartanburg County. And then if you want to pull up a little bit so we can see the Reedville Road intersection. So again, down here, this is City of Greer. This is the 101 interchange. And then you've got Reedville Road and Kist. So there's additional mitigation that will be at this intersection with a signal. And then the other future signal, which again would really hinge on whether or not this northern piece kind of developed and would have to be, the warrant study would have to be later, would be at the main school entrance. So potential here, but absolutely a signal here. And so again, this is approved zoning and special exception for a multifamily development right here. This is a Spinks gas station that's gone through first reading of annexation. And then this big piece right here is zoned C3 highway commercial. So again, this will be intense commercial uses. This is going to be multifamily. And then you've got, these are all individual residential developments here. And Chestnut Grove was the most recent annexation in addition to this mixed product that we discussed. So does everyone have a good sense of kind of where we are? I'm happy to.
Did you point out again where the other school that exists now is?
Sure, it is up here. So there's an existing, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong.
Elementary.
They're adding a middle school, but there's an existing elementary, and it's all in one parcel, and they're adding a middle school. And so that, again, that traffic study was included with background traffic as well, since it is not built out yet.
Abner Creek Elementary School is in session, so those traffic counts
Right.
were a part of the study that we did as fact, and then the middle school background traffic was added in as if that school was in existence, although it's just currently under construction, along with the other three developments we discussed.
This is probably beyond our jurisdiction, but this is a question of just wondering. Do you have any idea why they picked this particular piece of property for this school?
I'll have to defer to you.
The ability to connect to sewer drives a lot of development. It's very hard to do things like schools, manufacturing, things like that that don't have the ability to tie to sanitary sewer. Doing those type of developments on septic is not really an option.
Please, if you could, from the audience, let us address the applicant. I understand what your concerns are. I do understand. But you know, we just cannot operate with all the questions coming to the applicant from the audience. So basically, beyond what you just told us, that there's no.
I mean, you know, a high school, and you can see it from the site plan, I mean, needs a certain amount of space. And so one other thing I did want to, and it was a question that was asked by one of the folks during the public hearing. So the name of this school is Southern Collegiate Academy, and it is chartered through Limestone College. That is the way that they obtain their charter from the state is basically through a sponsorship of Limestone.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, so back to your question, I mean, the availability of sewer property that is available to be purchased of a certain size that allows you to fit not only the school, the parking, but have adequate stacking. You know, I look at the site plan and it probably looks like a race car track going through there, and that's so that there is adequate car stacking for pickup in the afternoon. You know, when either session gets out, that all of those cars can be staged on property, not off-site, not affecting any roads while they wait for school to be dismissed. This is very standard practice. You see it in the new Greer Middle School, which my firm is also the engineer for. It's very, very common practice, and SCDOT has basically stacking length requirements based on the number of students and the type of school that it is. And so we have exceeded those with this design.
Okay, to be clear, from my understanding, this is a charter school, which means it's part of the public school system, right?
It is a public charter school, but it does not receive funding from Spartanburg or Greenville County schools.
But there's no tuition rate to go to the school, right?
That's correct. It is free.
There was the previous plan that you had, which was the preliminary site plan, or conceptual. This is preliminary.
This
If you
is
roll back a
preliminary.
couple slides, there used to be a baseball diamond and the.
Sure.
That was
We can
previous.
show that. So we do have that slide. So during the annexation process, during the public hearing for Planning Commission, and again, the second reading with City Council, a site plan is not required for annexation. However, council did request to kind of see what the general plans were. So this was, again, a preliminary site plan. This, again, this piece right here is not being considered for the special exception at this time. It may or may not develop into a school. They did take into account the potential trips, but that is not part of the plan. They did subdivide this property, so it's only here. So based on this initial plan, they took it to Planning Advisory Committee. That is made up of internal departments, building, fire, planning and zoning, stormwater, I'm missing some. Engineering, of course, important. SCDOT, Greer CPW, all of the utility providers, and they provide feedback on this general plan. So during that process, planning and zoning staff talked about what we thought was appropriate for the special exception. We provided some conditions that staff was going to recommend to this board. And they took those conditions and redid their plan. And again, everyone's feedback, DOTs, planning and zonings, I'd say the biggest change was taking out this baseball and reorienting the football to meet our 50-foot building line and buffer requirements that staff was recommending to this board. So again, this is very preliminary. That's why it's important when there is a special exception, the site plan is not set in stone. It's showing you what is or could be possible. If you feel certain things need to be in there, then those are conditions. So what we are recommending is those 3 conditions on the one slide. Again, so that if the site plan changed a little, regardless, it's going to have that 50-foot line for any building or field. It's going to have a 25-foot buffer. It would have to have downlit lighting fixtures. That, again, would be a condition, whether or not this site, whether they changed parking to have a little parking here, or if they decided to do a soccer field instead of a football field. The site plan, I just want to make sure you understand, is not 100% complete. It's just a preliminary to show you what they're imagining, and then again, those conditions would make sure whatever that final plan, it would have to meet those. So did that answer? I hope it did, but I'm happy to elaborate.
For the sake of, one of the comments we heard was over communication, so let's just keep going, keep on unpacking this. So this is preliminary, and there's a final engineering plan that happens.
Yes.
And so can you speak to that?
Sure. So if the special exception were approved, the next step, again, it's already been through Planning Advisory Committee where we all provide initial comments. So then they would provide a site development plan, which are full civil drawings plus a stormwater study. that meets all City of Greer zoning ordinance regulations. It would have to meet any special exception conditions. It would have to meet the stormwater ordinance that's adopted by the city. And then again, it would have to meet any required mitigation by SCDOT. So we would require a site development plan. Any off-site improvements like that, the intersections at Reedville Road, that would go through permitting with SCDOT and an encroachment permit. That is separate, but we would require that to be completed before we would issue building permits for the site. So we do have very close communication with DOT in Spartanburg County, and it's kind of a joint effort. Does that, and then if, again, that were adopted, then the next step would be building permits, where they submit building plans, and then those, again, are reviewed by fire, by our building department. They're also reviewed by the school facility, which you might know more about than I do, but they also have to go through an additional round of review for school facilities to make sure they meet building code.
And the cost borne for road improvements, signaling, and all such other improvements are by the developer?
Yes, if they are triggered by the development, they would be, the developer would be required to do widening or any mitigation. It is possible, like the apartment complex is kind of in a similar timing. It is possible that they may share some of the cost, but if one project or the other did not move forward, and the one by itself triggered it, then they would be solely responsible for that mitigation. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions for
Sure.
staff. You mentioned like a couple of, if it were approved, there were a couple of ordinances they have to abide by. Is there a noise ordinance for a football stadium being so in close proximity to neighborhoods?
So the city does have a noise ordinance. I am not sure what the decibel level is. They would be subject to it. So certain hours, if there was noise, they could call the police department. It's not a planning and zoning ordinance. The noise ordinance is a citywide ordinance. Again, that is why staff recommended the 50-foot building or setback line for any field, as well as the additional plantings to help with any noise or light.
And, okay, I think I saw it on one of the slides. This is considered a suburban development area, correct? Okay, and I may be wrong, but based on some of the public comment, and especially those who said they moved to the area because it was secluded, I think they moved with the intention of having a rural area. So I just kind of want to talk about the growth, because based on some of the reactions, they were surprised about some of the growth that's coming there, and the city is viewing it as a suburban development versus how the residents are viewing it as a rural. So does this fit into the city's plan moving forward?
Yes, so there's two different aspects. There's zoning and then there's future land use. So future land use is kind of a 30,000 square foot eye toward the city. It's adopted on a 10-year basis, and it takes a look at our city and then our kind of potential growth area, and it does identify kind of character areas. So this particular tract, when we annex the property, we also assign it a category, and so it is categorized as suburban neighborhood. And again, if you want to go back to GIS for a second, so it also, and if you wouldn't mind turning on the layer for future land use. Yep, perfect. Okay. So these areas are traditional neighborhood, then these yellow are suburban neighborhood. These are recently annexed in. And if you want to zoom out a little, This purple is a transitional corridor, and then this green is actually a 1/4 acre kind of circle around this intersection that's a neighborhood center. And so if you want to maybe even zoom out a little bit more. So again, we have different kind of nodes and categories. And again, all of these areas with color are City of Greer. I mean, I will just comment that this area south of 85 is one of the fastest growing. We've seen numerous annexations really in this area, and this whole corridor over the last 10 years has been the majority of our annexations. So any property, we've already had inquiries about a couple of adjacent properties. Anything that's contiguous to something in the city of Greer is eligible for annexation. The city does not go out and solicit them, but if a developer buys property and wants to do a development and there's access to sewer, again, I just anticipate that this area, this corridor especially, and along here and all south of 85, I would anticipate growth and
So
more
you're saying
growth.
regardless of whether the school is there, it's going to experience growth?
I mean, I can't guarantee
Anticipated,
it, but
right.
based on the last 5 to 10 years and the available acreage of undeveloped land and capacity for sewer, yes, I would anticipate a lot
So transition from.
of growth in this particular area and honestly anywhere south of 85.
Okay, and then my last question was there any, we got a concern or maybe 2 concerns about access by emergency vehicles getting to homes? Has that been taken into consideration in the approval?
So we can go back to the site plan. Fire is a reviewer of Planning Advisory Committee. I mean, they did not raise any major concerns that we needed to address. This right here is planned to be an emergency access only. So it will have a gate with a Knox box. That's like a code that the fire, so if for some reason they could not get in here or need in and out quickly, they have an additional access.
One of the concerns was.
I understand that, but I
sharing the same entrance, that's my concern. You're putting everything, our main entrance is the main entrance to the school.
this is not the main entrance, actually. This is an exit only. This is the main entrance right here.
Well, it's still main entrance, it's.
So this is an exit only with a through left and a right turn only. So this is exit only. This is all queuing again, DOT. So there's a right lane and then a through left. So this is, again, this is all traffic exiting, not entering the site.
So why would you put it in front of the neighborhood?
So this is an engineering standard, DOT. It is actually safer if you line up intersections with intersections that are across the street. It's actually safer than trying to offset.
Please, if you would, let us again address the comments from staff to the applicant as well as from the board to the applicant. Can I back up one more question? And I go back to the other school that was there, that is there now. How far away is that school from this school? Give me your best guess.
2 to 3 miles. Mile and a half.
I was gonna guess 1.5 miles, but I'm not certain.
2 to 3 miles away. Okay, and my second
Back to
question is,
GIS.
you know, in looking at the plats on this and looking online at it also, there's a number of neighborhoods that are up and down this road. You got any idea how many residences are within 1 mile of this location? I know you have to pick out, sort of out of the air, but
I don't know offhand. I mean, I could find out for you pretty easily, but
okay, well, I do know that because.
I mean, I would say in the 500 to 800 range minimum.
Yeah.
If yeah.
I guess and I don't know how you exactly address this. In fact, I'm not sure you can. But just as a thought, you know, the people that moved into those neighborhoods, I would guess that most of them paid $300,000 to $500,000 for their houses. The ones in which I saw when I rode out there and looked at it, and they did it because of that was a fact that several of them made known this evening when they came to the podium, that, you know, the character of the community in which I'm moving into is the reason I bought here. And I go back to my questions a while ago about why here. But I do understand that it has to be somewhere, you know. So, you know, why here? It will change the character, and I'm not necessarily say that, you know, I'm going to be greatly opposed to this, but it will change the character of the neighborhoods in which they live in, no doubt about it. So, and I'm really not expecting an answer from you for that, because I don't think that you can.
It's a desired area to open a school such as this one. I mean, the developer does these across the southeast, and they're very particular in the type of land, the area that they're in, you know, all of those things. I mean, they didn't just throw a dart at the map and pick one, right? So, I mean, there's certain criteria that they have to have, and this site has all of those things.
Okay, I understand.
There was another comment about that a lot of things are happening very quickly, and that is very much true in District 3 specifically. But there is also a process by which everything is kind of going through. And so for just a second, if you don't mind going back to that first, that was part of the annexation plan. If you can flip between the two and
Sure.
just kind of walk everyone through what was changed and why it was changed. I think it's helpful because as I look at it, I can see what it is, but I'd like to hear
Sure.
what happened and why.
I may ask Chip to talk about major changes. I mean, that you made. I would say the biggest would be the fields, and that was based on planning staff's recommendations. But so, yeah, when a property is annexed into the city, the property owner or a developer, again, they have to have the owner's signature. So the person who's selling the property to them had to sign the petition for annexation to be brought into the city. When you petition to annex, you request a zoning. So they, again, picked a zoning that allowed for a charter school with a special exception. We don't allow schools in any district without a special exception. So again, this was any school, charter or otherwise. There is no zoning district that it could have gone in without a special exception. So they asked for R20 residential district zoning. And so it went to first reading of city council, and then it went to planning commission with a public hearing. We have to advertise in the paper, and then we also have to post the property 15 days before the public hearing. So it was posted for the public hearing for planning commission. It did get a recommendation of approval. Again, planning commission looks at whether or not the zoning is appropriate. So they did recommend approval to city council, and then city council ultimately then had a second reading after planning commission. And upon second reading approval, then it is officially part of the city of Greer. And then again, the next step was to go through planning advisory committee to get initial comments. That wasn't required, but staff did highly recommend it before they came before the Board of Zoning Appeals to make sure they'd gotten out any major concerns that staff or DOT or utilities had. So they did go through that meeting and that process. And then they provided an updated site plan and petition for this special exception. And again, we can go back to, or this was kind of the original preliminary. One of the biggest things was they decided to subdivide the property and really focus on this piece for now. And then again, based on planning's recommendations, they did take out one of the fields, reorient this so that it was further from the residential neighborhood. And then they did go ahead and add the recommended conditional landscaping buffer that, again, staff recommended. And Chip, did I miss anything else that you guys changed majorly? There was a little bit of changes based on the traffic study, I think, for some of the deceleration lanes or some of the storage, but I wouldn't call those major. They were always anticipated to be part of the project. Again, kind of these turn lanes into the site. Greer, the Greer Citizen, public hearings. We advertise for any public hearing for Planning Commission, Board of Architectural Review, and Board of Zoning Appeals. So they are different, as far as I know, they're different developers. And so this
They are different developers. The elementary school is chartered with the state, but they are not moving forward with their project at this time, but they do hold a charter to build a K through 8 school in this area.
It might come later is what it means, but it means it's not part of this consideration. Only this, what you see on the screen, this piece of the property with the high school is being considered at this time. And if this property, now that it's subdivided, if it were ever to come back for this school, again, there would be signs and newspaper and another public hearing with the Board of Zoning Appeals. And again, we would kind of take a look, just like we did for this one. We would relook, if the traffic counts were over a year old, they would have to redo them and update the study. If it was bigger or smaller, they would change the traffic counts. We would take a look at the circulation and the screening and all that separately. So again, this is not transparency-wise, this would absolutely come back. This could not come through unless, with our new unified development ordinance, if this is by right in this zoning district, and then that may be different. But under current zoning regulations, schools are required to have a special exception. I cannot guarantee that after the end of the year, the whole city is going to have a new zoning map and we're going to have a new zoning ordinance. Things may be different, but under what we have right now, that is what I can tell you for sure.
Okay, board, any further questions for the applicant?
Is this area going to be a school zone? That was another issue.
Chip, do you know, I would imagine it would have to be, but I don't know that that's
Oh,
been,
yes, yeah.
like
That come from the DOT?
From the DOT.
Okay. And just for background reference, north is not up and it's confusing. It's
I'm
Correct,
sorry,
yeah, I think-
it's difficult to
South
reference.
is actually the left side of the page.
But plan north, as we're discussing it, that extension of the road, which is outside of the city of Greer, as part of the DOT and the traffic study, what is the existing road width up there? It's not in compliance with the...
kissed.
Yes.
So.
As it extends
No.
straight into the ceiling as you're looking at it.
Right. The entirety of Kist Road was actually just widened, not a lot, per Spartanburg County. We did accept the portion of the roadway into city inventory in front of Chestnut Grove and this new property. So Kist in that specific area will be a city road. But Spartanburg County just recently did what they call reclamation. And so they widen it as much as they can within their prescriptive right-of-way. So it was recently widened all the way, what is that intersection? I'm blanking. I might have to pull up GIS again.
Burns, right?
No, it was way further. It was Abner Creek, thank you. Abner Creek all the way to 101. It was just recently widened, but they don't have specs, so I can't tell you. It is one lane in each direction, I will say that. It is.
Yes. Okay.
So I am talking about what has happened in the last 10 years and what we've seen happen, and constant inquiries from developers who are looking for large tracts of undeveloped land. So I'm just, again, speculating that these areas with large undeveloped farmland, Chestnut Grove 3 years ago was undeveloped. This subdivision right here adjacent to the middle school was undeveloped farmland. What we have seen in the last 10 years is people selling their farmland and it developing. So our future land use, again, does call for suburban neighborhood. So primarily residential, but with some secondary uses like parks, civic, institutional. And then again, like I said, we've identified this specific intersection as a major kind of commercial node. And so this is zoned C3 and this is zoned multifamily. So again, I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just telling you based on what we've seen over the last 10 years, we expect to see a lot of growth continue south of I-85.
Okay, and I think we understand. Y'all ready for the question?
Sorry, say it. What was your question?
That's it. I'm ready for the question.
Yeah.
Any other question for the applicant? Okay. Do we have a motion with regard to BZASE 23-06?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Was it motion to approve the y'all's recommendations?
Thank you.
Is that what you mean? Sorry.
Can we outline that recommendation?
Can you pull those up again? Thank you. Staff would like clarification. Does your motion include staff's recommended conditions as outlined on this slide? Again, with building lines, landscape buffers, and lighting.
My motion to approve is with the outlined recommendations from staff.
Second.
Is that okay with your second? Okay. You okay to
Okay,
call?
we have a
Okay.
motion and we have a second on it.
All right, Ms.
Call for the vote.
Chesmelaglu,
Approve?
Mr. Choma,
Approve?
Mr. Crosby,
Approved.
Mr. Norris,
Approve?
Dr. Huey,
Denied. Part D.
D, okay, thank you. And Mr. Griffin?
Denied.
And do you have a criteria? Sorry, criteria,
Yeah.
also D?
Yeah.
Okay.
Character of the neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If you would, be back in contact. It was approved. So be back in contact if with the staff or further.
We are in constant contact, so that sounds good.
Okay. Other business, planning and zoning staff, is there anything we need to?
Shame on all of you. Absolutely right.
Is there?
Oh, wait a second.
Is there any other business we need to take care of as other business?
I would like to welcome Mr. Toma to the board.
Oh, yes, we should have done that.
That's okay. It's hard when its staff report is at the end of the meeting. But he is District 3, taking Christy Poole's position. She decided not to renew her term after her June 30th expiration, and council did. Could you please take this out to the lobby? We are still conducting a meeting. Could you please take this to the lobby? Thank you. So we just want to welcome Mr. Toma to the board for his 3-year term, and you came for a very lively first meeting, but we appreciate you doing your due diligence and welcome you to the board. And that's all we have other than our monthly reminder to please get training in before the end of the year. We're already to July. Surprise.
Okay.
So that's all we have.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I second it.
Thank you.
Was in 2018, that school off of Adler Creek Road, it was like a big house. They were trying to convert it.
I think this might be the longest one over here.
I mean, it did last 3 hours. What are we at?
Remember that?
Yeah.